Hello everyone! I recently recapped and reviewed Big Brother 5, so now it's time for me to rank the house guests based on their gameplay skills and their potential in other seasons. So it is the BB5 Big Brother 5 Game Players tier ranking. I'm not going to go through the tiers because I've done that throughout the several videos already, and I'm not going to describe what the tiers are since it should be self-explanatory here. I'll just put it up on the screen and then we'll just move on from there. At dead last at 14th is no other than Holly. This was a very easy choice, and I had a good feeling she would place here even before I rewatched the season. For some reason, everyone thought that she was this cold manipulator, especially of Jace, when that wasn't the case at all, which made it even worse, since she was getting accused of being something that she wasn't. In addition to that, she didn't gel with most of the house, and it was the girls who actively disliked her when she wanted to be friends with many of them, but she said that she's used to girls and people in general judging her. Even most of the guys in the house, who weren't close to her either, and damn near everyone else in the house thought she was very expendable. There was literally no strategy with Holly, as she didn't get into any alliances or try to really play the game at all. It was clear that she was recruited a few weeks before the season started so she could be a wacky early boot fodder, and she fulfilled her role in that. She was going home in the second week when Marvin nominated her, despite Lori being the target, but she was lucky that Jace won the veto and used it on her. But she thought that it was a bad thing that he wanted to do this, showing her poor reads. Drew, who is someone who is aligned with her showmance, won the HOH and nominated her because he just didn't care for her and claimed that the showmance was breaking his alliance up. This time, the other horsemen turned on her and it sealed her fate. Holly isn't doing well on any season. She's horrible socially, non existent strategically, and horrible competitively. At 13th is Mike. I was thinking about putting him in the bad category since it did seem like he has a decent enough of a grasp of strategy. He was able to see that Scott and Jace were close, though that was obvious to most of the other house guests, so he wasn't bringing any news, and told the others that they need to team up to take them out. Also, he was the first one to mention that with the way that the veto picks were done that year, that the HOH can gather a group of people together to ensure someone gets sent home by not having them play the veto, the target, I mean, but he didn't get all the details of that. I think he was too laser focused on it to realize that many of the other house guests were already planning on taking Scott and Jace down, and he needed to find another way to integrate himself within the house. It was clear that he was cast to be the uber conservative house guest whose views would clash with everyone in the house, but he was able to get along with people like Marvin and Will, who you can tell production expected him to clash with for many reasons. The age difference was a huge issue for him, and while he wasn't as combative as casting hoped, he wasn't getting along with and bonding with many of the house guests, and was struggling a lot with the social element. No one stuck their necks out for him, and while he had some decent reads and ideas, he can never put it together, and refused to see the bigger picture. You can't do much if you're most likely going to be in early out, and will struggle socially. At 12th place is Scott. Clearly, I never thought of him as a player in a high point of view, or I thought of him highly, but I came out of this rewatch with an even lower opinion on him in this element. He grouped himself with the Four Horsemen, and that's a good thing, especially since he and Jace won all the comps in the first week. The issue is, they essentially alienated everyone else and made it clear that they only saw the others as expendable numbers. Marvin clearly wanted to work with them for the first several weeks, but Scott specifically was pushing for Marvin to go on Drew's HOH, which was a dumb move. But it isn't shocking, since he also pushed for Harley to go home that week, when it could have been a relatively close vote otherwise, but he made it a landslide because he was jealous of Harley and Jace's relationship. He also planned on vetoing Jace when they're on the block together in his final week, because he was so sure he would stay against Marvin, and we clearly saw that he couldn't stay against Marvin. It seems like, unlike Jace, his alliance actually really liked him, so that is good. At the same time, it doesn't seem like the rest of the house did, as he actively picked on people who were not in his alliance and rubbed it in people's faces. In addition to all that, he was a compulsive liar who lied about so many things for little to no reason, and that helped more people distrust him as well. He kind of aligned with people based on demographics, and the one competition he won was thrown to him by Jace, so he isn't even as great of a competitor as he thinks he is. There's really little that is good about him as a player, but at least he had an alliance, so he is here. At 11th is Jace. I mentioned beforehand how getting with people based on demographics, whether it is gender, race, or both, is rarely a good thing, because you don't have a chance to get to know the allies as a person, and before you realize that you don't like them, so much time and events happen in the house, and you're tied to them no matter what. I mention this because that's clearly what happened to Jace, as he got with all the young white men in the house so they could run the season. The issue is, his alliance rarely listened to him on his advice, even though he was more often right than wrong. Drew didn't like him much, he didn't like Drew much either, and his relationship with Scott became more and more contentious over stupid BS. What made it even worse is that he was awful socially in this season. From the very first week, when he was HOH, a lot of people are targeting him and found him to be irritating due to his wild antics and picking fights with people, which continued throughout his entire stay in the house. Because he was the first HOH, he should have set himself up in a better position, socially and strategically, but he couldn't even do that because of his personality and antics, so that makes him even worse. Competitively, Jace is very good and is one of the best in this era of Big Brother, despite his short stay in the season. Most of his wins and strong performances were in physical competitions, so that does kind of deter from it, though his HOH win was mainly trivia about the other house guests. It did cause him to be the very first victim of a backdoor. I was shocked to find out that he really isn't bad strategically, or he has a good concept of what needs to be done, creating a solid alliance, building additional numbers outside of it so you can control the game, take out the people who are not with you and actively targeting you, don't believe people who have a reason to lie, and to keep people who want you around, like Holly and Marvin. The issue is, his social faults prevented any good idea he had, and he never put himself in check, and the execution was more often than not sloppy. You can't do anything if you are socially poor, and while he isn't bad strategically, he isn't great enough to overcome his faults. The final person in this tier at 10th is Cowboy. Some people might find it weird that I put a runner-up who was one vote away from winning the season in the bad tier, but when you dig deep into the meat and potatoes, you realize that it isn't as filling as you thought, and I'm clearly referring to Cowboy's game and what he did throughout the season. Meaning, Nokomis felt obligated to vote for him due to the fact that he is her sibling, despite making it clear that she did not respect his game, and I think the twins voted for him because they thought he would get no votes, as they mentioned that they wanted to be friends with Drew more. The lack of respect comes from a few things. One was that he liked using his backstory as a sob story to get people to feel bad for him, so people can also carry him around. He kept on talking about how he was poor his entire life and works at an entry job, though he ended up getting into an argument about Marvin about his in-laws having money, where he kept on mentioning in his story questioning this, rather than anything pertaining strategy, and also shows that he wasn't aware of any strategy that he did, or really didn't use any throughout the season. Speaking about his strategy, it was borderline non-existent. He did get into the Four Horsemen alliance, which isn't a bad thing, but he had absolutely no agency and respect in that alliance, where he offered the least strategically, other than offering dumb ideas like targeting Marvin, the only other adjacent ally they had. He mainly followed the other three around with everything, which caused people outside of his alliance to respect him less, since it came off like the non-cool nerd, following the popular athletic jocks for some self-validation. After that blew up, he was essentially carried and left alone for the rest of the season, since the Pinky Alliance blew themselves up and he was being friendly with the twins, who he wasn't even in an alliance with. I don't see him ever being strategically active or aware, which I think you need to be a good player. He didn't even use his social relationships to keep himself around, or he floated. He was literally the definition of a coaster, someone who was just dragged along and put off. The one chance he had at making his own move came when he won the Final Four veto, and he decided to evict Nokomis over Diane, who would never take him to the Final Two, where he's essentially guaranteed the Final Two if he took Nokomis to the Final Three with Drew also being there, and this could have given him a one move where he undercut Drew, and to stand out as a player. Throughout the season, the other house guests will call him a snitch, and while we never saw any of this, it just showed how lowly they thought of him, in addition to calling him a leech. Very little of what he did was strategy, and it just seems like his personality, while lacking awareness. At ninth place is Lori. While I don't think she's as much of a screw up as every other pre-drawer on this list, hence me putting her in this tier, I am not very confident on her being in this tier or being this high, especially compared to some of the others, especially the runner-up. Anyways, we see her make the choice to take the money, I believe it was $10,000 on the first night, causing for everyone to be on top for the first week, and it just was not the best way to integrate herself in the house, since some of the guys never forgot about it, even if others did. In addition to that, when she was eventually nominated, she went back and forth about whether she wanted to go home and was very public about it, to the point where others not in her alliance, like Holly, knew about it. At the same time, she did have some good qualities. She was able to be a part of the majority alliance, which is what would become the Picking Figure alliance, and was pretty good in the few competitions she played in. There was a plan to keep her in the house against Holly, and wanted to use the nominations to stay the same. And if she won the veto, she would have kept things the same since she had the votes. Unfortunately for her, Jace had enough sense to realize what was happening, so he used the veto on Holly. In general, she is very low on this tier, but I can see her doing better and she has a higher ceiling if she were on many other seasons. The final person in this tier at 8th is Natalie. There really isn't much for me to say about Natalie. For the first 5 weeks of the season, she was only in the house half of the time, and during that half, she had to pretend that she was her sister. So not only are you missing half of the time to spend time with and bond with and strategize with the cast, but you're not able to be yourself, which puts Natalie at a huge disadvantage in every way possible. We don't know how she would have played if she was on her own, or even if the twist failed with AJ being evicted, and she would then have to play on her own, but it wouldn't have been from the very beginning. When she did enter the house as a gamer, it caused people to struggle even more to differentiate herself and her sister, and it brought a lot of resentment, especially since that was an additional ally, an unbreakable bond, and another slot gained, where they entered the house as one person. Natalie gets flagged for a lot of AJ's moves, like the pinky promise to Will, which Natalie technically didn't do, but since the twins were supposed to pass information to one another as they were one, she got the smoke as well. Apparently the house saw her as the fiery one in comparison, as she was the main one snapping when they were nominated. She didn't seem to be as strong in competitions, and might be worse socially. Overall, she is one of the bigger question marks in BB history. There is only one person in this tier, and at 7th is Adrian. I was unsure about whether to put her on the same tier as her sister or not, since she was also only in the house for half of the time during the first 5 weeks of the season, meaning she lost a lot of time. At the same time, they were playing as her, which put Adrian at more of an advantage, and when they were separated, we saw more of her than Natalie. When the Pinky Alliance was formed and did all the promises, it did seem like it was her who made those promises, and when she was on the block, it was her who had to campaign to get the votes to stay. Even still, we still don't know how she would play if she was completely by herself, and if she would have even gained HOH-itis in the same way without her sister. There really isn't a whole lot to talk about strategically. She got herself in the majority women's alliance and was seen as one of the leaders in that alliance, partially due to her bold personality and being good in fitness. This could also be due to when Natalie, who has the stronger personality, was her as well. When she and her sister completed the twin twist, there was a huge shift, since they made it clear that everyone else was expendable and they didn't have to keep their pinky promises anymore. Adri gets more flack since she was the actual HOH and was able to make those choices, where she didn't tell anyone who she would nominate and kept her alliance in the dark. Outside of the house, outside of Michael and Ju not liking her nominations, she demanded that the house make it a tie vote so it could be all about Adria. Her behavior isolated people like Diane, who could have given her a life raft, and she spent the next 2 weeks campaigning and complaining about why people aren't playing the game and taking no accountability for the position she put herself in. I will say that Adria is good at competitions though, with one HOH win and two veto wins, while performing strongly in other competitions as well. She can clearly get herself in an alliance, and I don't see her being an early boot often, but her gameplay mistakes and the lack of foresight, even if targeting well early is the right move, the sloppiness of her game is most likely what will always catch up to her. At 6th place is Will. He is someone who generally has the traits to do well in Big Brother, and I don't think he did much wrong in the season overall, despite his placement. He had a good read on a lot of the house guests, with Scott and Jace being the obvious bros. Cowboy is someone who isn't a cool boy, so he will follow the alphas. Marvin is someone who is a lot more smarter than appeared. Diane is very mouthy, so on and so forth. Production used a lot of his reads in the diary room, and out of everyone in the picking alliance, he was one of the few who made sure that he was on good terms with everyone in the house, and actively did damage control with the Four Horsemen. He helped create a plan called Operation Security Blanket to save Lori, but was outplayed by Jace winning the veto, and also knew that the twins would be a problem when they came back. His game was mainly being a loyal ally, but making sure that no one is targeting him, which is a good strategy, especially since he was one of the better social players of the season. I do have to talk about the homophobia regarding him being targeted, especially when Adria mentioned that the Bible told her who to nominate, and apparently she and Natalie laughed about the two minorities being nominated on the feeds, or at least that's what I read. It of course rubbed people the wrong way in the house, and he did the work to make sure that he didn't blow his lid, and was able to have it be a close vote. But I also think him making it clear to the twins that he didn't care much for them anymore once they came in together was why he was put in danger. Overall, I do think Will focuses too much on who is quote-unquote good and who is quote-unquote bad, but he was one of the more level-headed people on the cast, which helps many Big Brother players. I do think he was the linchpin for that alliance, and it started to fall apart once he left, as everyone started making semantics about the pinky promises they all made, but it was obvious to people that he was the linchpin as well. With all that being said, I don't know much about his ceiling as a player. We never see him do anything outright bad, but we don't really see him do anything good, and he was not a flexible player in the season, despite having better relationships than some of his allies. It seemed like he was kind of picking up steam and then was just snipped. He was not good in competitions and was solid in social skills and strategy. I've just seen more from the others, which is why they are higher. At 5th is Marvin. One positive that I will say about Marvin is that he is very good strategically. He knows how to position himself between both sides of the house where they all need him for a number and doesn't commit to either, but it never alienated others, or he never alienated others for most of the season. The Four Horsemen used him as a number during the first few weeks, and the Picking Square Alliance used him as a number for the next several weeks after that. He was the one who ended up creating the six-finger plan and really involved it into what the plan came to be, as we see him talk about it with Diane before Nicole speaks to Marvin. And he specifically spoke to that side of the house because they had the numbers to boot Jace now, and to integrate himself with them. With the twins making their move, not only did it put him in a direct line of fire throughout Adria's HO8, but it also caused him to gain a few weeks afterwards, which were spent with booting the twins. Several of the house guests mentioned that he knew how to separate personal from business, which is a good trait, and he was one of the few who knew how to do that in the season. Socially, Marvin was all over the place. I have to firstly discuss how his touching and flirting made the woman extremely uncomfortable, and of course it would cause the cast to respect him less in general. He was a PG-13 person cast on a PG at best program and season, and he also got himself into some arguments in the season, since he saw things so differently from the others, or than the others in the cast. There were moments where the house guests mentioned that Marvin is extremely funny and brings a lot of light into the house as well, as we do see him getting along with people like Jace and some of the horsemen, and even people like Will and Diane at times. At the same time, I do think he started to blow it later on in the season, where he used his HOH to target Adria, who was the only other loner in the house, and he clearly made that choice a personal one, and he never actually found himself in a solid alliance throughout the entire season, and he wasn't a good enough floater like a June or an Allison, and the dynamics didn't fit that floater gameplay for him to make it further. And I can honestly see him doing worse if he was put on many other seasons, due to everything I've stated here. So I don't see him being the most consistent either. The final person in this tier at 4th is Nokomis. There has been a movement pertaining to Nokomis being overrated that has grown throughout the Big Brother community over the last few years, and I can't say that I disagree. At the same time, I do think there are some layers to her game that did her very well in the season and benefited her too. She actually had a somewhat decent relationship with the Horsemen during the first 2 or so weeks, where they didn't target her and used her for her vote, but it mainly came up because she was Cowboy's sister and they needed someone. She did not like how they only wanted to use her, and when she decided to stick with the Pinky Alliance, her position in the game worked really well. Nokomis was the first one to execute the first backdoor, so I do appreciate her for that. And she made sure that she was not the big target within her alliance for a majority of the season. She worked really well with the people in her alliance and worked well strategically with the cast she was on as well. At the same time, she did get way too much credit for the Six Finger Plan, and she gives herself all of the credit as well. Marvin approached her with the idea, and while she did get rid of the house target, she didn't strengthen her relationships with the rest of the house. Nicole stated several times that she didn't have much of a relationship with Drew, Cowboy, and Marvin, and we all saw her relationships with the twins completely disintegrate. It caused her to solely rely on Karen and Diane at the end point of the season, where she became a shield with winning 2 other HOH competitions as well. Her being good at competitions is a great trait for her, and it caused her to be a jury threat to win. I think Nokomis is pretty solid to good strategically, not great like her reputation has made her seem, knows how to lay a low profile for about the first 60% of the season, and was able to gain respect within the cast while being okay socially and being good at competitions. At the same time, she wasn't good socially with people who were not in her alliance, wasn't very flexible strategically, had poor jury management with people not in her alliance, and was outplayed by Diane, Drew, and Cowboy. At the same time, she was able to keep a level head despite the twist and being backstabbed. She was willing to get dirtier as the season went on, but it was mainly due to her brother and seeing him as expendable. For the season she was in, Nokomis played a good game, but it might be too specific for this season. At 3rd is Diane. She's one of my favorite house guests ever, but when I started rewatching the season, I noticed more and more of her flaws. The first one is that she has a big mouth and tends to stick her foot in her mouth quite a bit. We see this with how she handled Holly in general, telling the Horsemen that there are sights in the house, and when she initially approached Wills about what would become the Pinky Swear Alliance, and how they'll drag him as far as they can. It does seem like she worked on that trait throughout the season and became a lot more selective with what she would say to people, though there are still some flaws with how she would manage people on their way out of the house, like the twins, Marvin, and Karen, who were all really pissed off with her as they left. And that's the majority of the jury, 4 votes out of 7. Despite all of that, Diane has a lot of strengths. Her biggest one to me is her resilience and how she is willing to just go there and to make things happen. So many people before and after her play the game so passively and lets things happen around them the entire season. But Diane was really making moves from the beginning. She was really instrumental in making sure the Pinky Alliance solidifies and was working on it from the first week, and also had that connection with Drew, where it would cause the Horsemen to not immediately target her. She was the one who made sure that Holly was on the block on Drew's HOH so they can get her out, and then she made sure that she was the first one to destroy the Forest Horsemen, and she made the first move to destroy them with her HOH. She always kept her options open, like proposing her twin alliance with Drew and the twins in the mid-game, and then at the end, putting herself in the middle of the 2 duels in Cowboy and Drew and Karen and Nokomis. This flexibility is something that most of the house guests this season didn't have, and it's why she's one of the better players of the season. Diane can pull a clutch competition win when she needs to, which is an important trait, is good strategically, and while she can be messy, she's actually pretty good socially, where she is still a jury threat to win, despite her poor management. Diane wanted to win, knew when to pivot from dead ends to make new ends for herself, and is great with adaptability. At the same time, she was way too sprung over Drew from the very beginning of the season, and it's clear she wanted to carry him along mainly due to his looks, and always underestimated him playing his own game, instead of assisting her with her game. In 2nd place is Karen. There is definitely a movement within the Big Brother fanbase to give Karen her props, and I've seen people claim that she's a top 10 BB house guest overall as a player, and while I don't know about all of that, like at all. I actually kind of disagree with that. One thing that I do agree with is that she did not get much credit during the season, and it's clear that the producers didn't care a lot about her, and due to that, she was extremely under-edited on the show. Karen was arguably the only one that knew the main component of jury management and the power that the jurors had, which is something that many people ignored in the early seasons, as well as many other seasons since this one. Karen always made sure that she was on good terms with everyone in the house, even the people that she did not personally like, and the people that she had absolutely no interest in working with. Out of everyone, she was truly the social queen of the season. Strategically, I definitely think she was good as well. Outside of making sure that she was safe and on good terms with everyone, she made sure that she was working with people who had bigger targets than herself. Lori and Will were always bigger targets than her. When she worked with the Pinky Alliance, Diane, Will, and the twins were always bigger targets than herself, and then Nicole Myth became a bigger target when she won 2 consecutive HOHs. Karen was more than fine with letting other people make the moves that benefited her, while she was the sniper from the side and the main influence. Apparently, she was the one who influenced Diane to stick with the Pinky Alliance instead of the twins, and she was a major force in the disintegration of Diane and Drew's relationship, especially from the final 6. She also knew not to throw out names to the twins when Adria won HOH. While I think Karen is good socially and strategically, competitions were definitely an issue for her, even though she threw quite a bit of them. But she also had the awareness to throw competitions. If it doesn't better for her, it's a good skill as well. Karen was all about letting her social game carry her and dropping strategic tidbits here and there to get things done as well. At the same time, I do think Karen was a bit passive at times, had the mentality of the good people, and she stated that she was fine losing to someone she was loyal to and was a stronger, tougher opponent to the end, even if she would lose to them. And at first place is none other than our winner. I really didn't want to have to put him as first, and throughout the rewatch, I was hoping that anyone would give me reasons to put someone else that wasn't him at first. In general, Drew has all the skills to do very well in virtually every Big Brother season. Level-headed, calm, non-confrontational or dramatic, socially skilled, strategically competent with the ability to improve as the season went on, is very self-interested, and is good at competitions. In the season, while it was clear that he was working with the 4 horsemen, no one targeted him during that part of the season, and a few of the women still wanted to drag him along, so he was able to separate himself from them. Drew never had any serious issue with anyone in the season, and we saw him being able to get along with several people who were nothing like him, which isn't something a lot of people possess. This became very important when people were being sent to the jury house, as he didn't treat people like utter crap, where many of his castmates did. At the same time, I do feel his looks played a heavy part in his social game, and some of it wasn't intentional. Drew is interesting to me in an element, since he's the prototypical player that gets into either a bro alliance or predominantly male alliance, in addition to a showmance, and runs with it throughout the entire season. It was clear that he wanted to ride the 4 horsemen until the very end, but his HOH actively made sure that didn't happen, since he took out Holly, who was a number for the alliance. If he did it so he would individually be in the middle of the alliance and in the middle of the house, I would respect it, but like Jason in BB3, it's clear that wasn't why he did it, but saw her as a distraction and was kind of manipulated by Diane to do it. In addition to that, he only turned on the alliance because he mainly didn't like Jace, where he used the veto to send him home, and it might have helped him if Jace was in jury, where he would have left it alone if Scott was in Jace's place, essentially. He was able to undercut Diane by booting Will with the twins, and it was clear he wanted to work the twin alliance longer. But then we see him nominate Diane twice, showing that he was able to put her in jeopardy, and then he cuts her at the final 3 due to her drunken rant. Drew won the most HOH competitions in a season at the time and held that record for many years, so he is good in competitions. He became good strategically and was good socially as well, but something is holding him back from me putting him in the great tier. I guess that compared to Jason, who he is similar to, but I don't think his social game is as good, and I don't think he has a natural inclination or draw that doesn't involve the woman lusting after him, and there was an element of Diane dragging him where Jason wasn't dragged by anyone. I mean, he was close to losing to Cowboy, and that says it all. He is good at everything, but I don't think he excelled as much in comparison. I rank the BB5 cast as game players, and this might be the strongest cast as game players from this era I think BB4 is also close, but I don't see any of the other ones coming close. But I might be shocked with BB6. It was definitely fun to look over this season, and I've already started my BB6 rewatch, so that should be out sooner than later. Thank you all for following me on this journey, and I'll continue with something soon. Have a nice day.